This is episode 37 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and my co-host today is guest geek Carl Cranney from the Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree podcast.
Hello, everyone.
So, if you haven't listened to their podcast, this is our first recommendation. Go and check it out. There's they got a lot of good pop culture discussion with gospel insights, etc. They made me cry at least once with discussion on Inside Out 2. So, after the movie had already made me cry. So, that was great. And y'all also had Michael from our team on your podcast for, I forget what the movie was, but it had Amy Adams that you guys discussed a while back.
It was, oh gosh, now you're making me forget the name of the, it was Arrival.
Arrival, that's right.
Yeah.
We were talking about doing our homework beforehand, and I should have written that one down. But yeah, Michael was on your podcast. I thought it'd be good for both sides. Good exposure.
Yeah,
Interview you on
Liz
our
and I are
podcast.
both. Liz and I are both bona fide nerds, and so we probably cover more sort of nerd content on our pop culture podcast than maybe we should. But it's what we like, so it's what we do a lot of it.
Well, and it's right up our alley over here too. So I'm happy for the interview. Happy to create some content together. I know you and Liz are both pretty busy these days with she's finishing her dissertation, I think, right?
Her master's thesis, yeah.
Ooh, that hurts my head just thinking about the idea of one. But yeah, like I've even mentioned to you guys, like I'd be happy. There's like, oh, have you discussed this? Have you discussed this? Like, let me know if you want someone to discuss this. So.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
We plan on getting back into it once we can call her Master Busby, but that won't be for a couple of months yet.
Yeah.
Which should be a thing, and I'm sad that it isn't in our culture. Like, once you get a master's degree, they should call you Master So-and-so, but here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not really a good, you got to get your doctorate for it to change your title, which,
yeah,
it is what it is. That's like one of the only reasons I'd get my doctorate, but beside the point.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do our quick recommendations, and then I want to talk about your history and your podcast and have some fun there.
Sure.
Just earlier today, I finished reading the Ellimist Chronicles. I don't know if you remember the Animorphs books growing up.
Oh, yeah.
But the Ellimist Chronicles is like backstory, flashback to the all-powerful Ellimist that recurs through the series. And other than the last few chapters, it could pretty much be its own standalone sci-fi book. It's only in the last few chapters that you start to see it spans thousands and thousands of years, so you could really, until the last few chapters, you don't start to even hear about the alien species from the Animorph series. So my brother had kind of described it as a high concept science fiction that could have been its own standalone book, and I'm not even sure I know what that means exactly, but it was trippy. I'm gonna have to reread it, and me and Russell on our podcast have plans to read through the series together, and I'm pretty sure it's just going to trip my brain up again when I get there again.
Yeah. Well, I like science fiction that has thousands of years of history. Sometimes that can be boring to read, but other times it can be quite fun, and that is like part of science fiction that I really enjoy, is seeing how things evolve over eons. So that's one I'll have to put in my queue to read. Revisit some old memories from the Animorphs back in the day too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the series still holds up.
Yeah. My recommendation, something that I've had a project sort of ongoing since they first came out with the list, was NPR did a sort of crowdsourced top 100 science fiction and fantasy books. And when I saw it, I realized I only read like 35 or 40 of them or so, and I thought this is a tragedy. So I've been slowly working my way through it. And so my two recommendations are two different takes um, on the King Arthur mythos. I just finished Mary Stewart's Crystal Cave sort of saga, and I kind of didn't enjoy it because it was so low magic that I didn't understand why Merlin was even there and what he was doing. But now I'm also reading T.H. White's The Once and Future King, which is also from the top 100 list, but is also about Arthur and his knights, and I'm enjoying it much more. It's interesting to read two versions of the same story, and so those are my recommendations: The Once and Future King by T.H. White and Mary Stewart's Crystal Cave saga, um, both on King Arthur and his knights, and both from NPR's Top 100 Science Fiction and Fantasy list, which is like a decade old at this point, so I feel like it would be interesting to see if they updated it, but I'm still going through it.
Oh yeah. Well, an Arthurian legend and mythology is also weird, and like at this point there's so many different takes on it that you got so many different. I in some ways I'd be interested to get back to the source material, but based on how I did with like Greek mythology in my civilization class, I don't think it would go very well. But I think of like
Right.
Arthurian legend, there's the books you mentioned, there's the BBC Merlin, there's Once Upon a Time did a take on it, and then there's Magic Treehouse from when I was a kid, and now my daughter's reading those. So
Right. Yeah.
it
The
covers a lot. Oh, and Sword in the Stone. I can't forget Sword in the Stone.
Right. Which is clearly based on the first book of T.H. White's the Once and Future King. So it's been fun sort of reading that and recognizing all the beats from the Disney
Okay.
movie. Yeah, that's fun. I think if you want to go back to source material, there's really only one that they're all sort of basing on, and it's La Morte d'Arthur, which is by a French author in like the 17 or 1800s, who sort of culled them together and sort of reinvented the genre. And everybody is sort of cribbing off of that guy. I think you can find him on Project Gutenberg. It's way in the public domain by now. Um, but I don't know. That's a deep dive that I might do after I'm done with the Once and Future King.
Once and Future King would be interesting though, because I always, and I'm sure most other Disney fans would agree that like Sword in the Stone, it's like barely about King Arthur because it's all like prequel to him being King Arthur.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like set up for another movie that Disney never did.
Right. Yeah.
So, but instead we're getting a third Frozen.
The people have spoken. I don't know. The
Oh
market
yeah,
does what the market does.
it's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, and then after that we'll talk about the podcast itself. But give us a little background on Carl.
All right. Well, I think for our purposes here, I should just mention that I have been a nerd since way before it was cool. I remember the dark days when not every other movie was for Marvel or DC, and you get beat up by if you played Dungeons and Dragons in junior high and high school. But there, as part of the genesis of my being interested in these sort of topics that have led me to be the co-host of this podcast, when I was in middle school, I read the Piers Anthony series called The Incarnations of Immortality, and the first book is about death, like the angel of death. And like the second book is about fate, and the third one's about nature, and then eventually you get to God and Satan. And it's this really interesting world with these sort of God is the guy who runs the show, and Satan runs hell, and there are all these sort of people in the middle who are sort of trying to do their job under the auspices of these greater powers. And it was interesting because part of the through line of the entire series is that God is currently absent and not really doing his job. And it's angering everybody, even Satan, who's like, what am I doing here if there's nothing to oppose? I'm trapped in these rules that sort of exist that don't change. And I remember thinking even as a teenager going, huh, I think if I were not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for whom there is a literal prophet, for whom God speaks to and conveys his will to the people of earth, I would be very sympathetic to the idea that God is up there in heaven not doing his job. And so it got me sort of thinking about issues of theology in pop culture. And that's just been something that I've kept going as I've read and encountered different books or comic series or movies or TV shows. I remember reading Spawn with one sort of recent convert on my mission. The Preacher series, which I don't recommend for a Latter-day Saint audience, and certainly not the TV show. But I think a lot of us might be fans of Supernatural or Constantine, more recently Lucifer. There are all these sort of stories set in a vaguely Judeo-Christian / Islamic system where there is a God and there is a Satan and there is a hell and there are angels and demons and there's these fights going on. And it was interesting to me to see how they dealt with the fact that if there is this all-powerful good being, why doesn't he just snap his fingers and wipe the bad guys out and that ends the show? But why are we even having competition? Why is there even drama? Why is there even something to compete against if there is this all-powerful good being? And so the writers have to come up with reasons why God does not immediately just snap his fingers and wipe out the bad guys, which dovetails a lot with sort of the reasons that various theologians from the Jewish and the Christian and sometimes the Muslim faiths have come up with reasons why God doesn't just snap his fingers and wipe out all the bad guys and all the sin on earth. And so it's been fun for me sort of over the course of my life to encounter different stories that, because it's not dramatic to have an all-powerful being who can just end the story by waving a wand or snapping his fingers, they have to come up with reasons why it doesn't just end the story, and that dovetails well with a lot of reasons theologians have come up with why God doesn't just show up and wipe out the bad guys and just obliterate Satan and end hell and whatever else you might think he wanted to do. So that's been a theme in my life. And when Liz suggested the podcast, it was mostly her brainchild at first, but I was there for the first couple of episodes, sort of on and off. And eventually we just realized that we both liked working together, and it was clear I had a lot that sort of I could bring to the conversation, and I was willing to help edit. And so now we co-host the podcast, and we're going on almost our 50th episode. So we've been going for a couple years now, and like we said earlier, plan on picking it up once she's done finishing her master's thesis on a more regular basis. So that's a little bit about me and sort of the nerd reasons why I would do a podcast on pop culture and sort of religious issues. Is these stories have always fascinated me because of their mirror to real world religious conversations.
And I like that. And I never watched Supernatural. By the time I kind of got intrigued by it, it was already like 10 seasons in. And I was like, I don't have the time or energy to commit to watching all 10 seasons at this point. But it did intrigue me. I had a roommate who watched it, and I watched a few episodes, and I was definitely tempted. I watched Constantine, at least the one that tied into the DC Arrowverse. And it was a shame that series only lasted like 8 episodes, and then kind of had to get resolved through Legends of Tomorrow, which was not so Judeo-Christian. It was just kind of whatever mythology they could think of.
Sure.
It was weird, but it fit for Legends.
Yeah.
But no, I like that. I like that question though, of like that kept coming up, because especially I finished reading the Ellimist Chronicles, like I said, and it was kind of the same question of, this Ellimist is the all-powerful godlike being. Why doesn't he just fix everything? That's kind of the question through all 50 Animorph books, is, off and on whenever he appears, like, why does he not just fix things? And I mean, he's godlike, not actually God, but in the backstory we kind of get why he doesn't just fix things. And to get it from a not God perspective was also interesting too.
So I'm curious, what's their answer in that series? Why doesn't he just wipe out the bad guys?
I mean, by the time of the series beginning, it's a lot more complex because um there's a like Satan like figure called Krayak that if they don't play by the rules that have been established, then if Elemis does things that Krayak's not okay with or that's not within their rules, then Krayak's just going to destroy everything. Like there's counter forces in there, back and forth. But even in the Elemis Chronicles, before Krayak comes into the picture, you know, Elemist, who started out as not a godlike, all-powerful being, learned over the eons that there just the consequences of interfering and the consequences of his actions, to the point that even before Krayak came around, that not every good deed was to the betterment of whichever civilization he was trying to help.
Sure. So
Not
it's
all of
kind of
these threads are good ones to pull at.
a prime directive approach from Star Trek, right? You don't interfere in the lower civilizations; they have to develop on their own. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds like, which is interesting. That's more of a problem when it is the creator who you're talking about, not just somebody who happened to develop to become very powerful. That shifts the discussion a little bit.
Yeah.
I had the same experience, much with you with Supernatural. I watched, I think, so maybe people don't know this, but the first 5 seasons of Supernatural were very well planned out, and they sort of had a show Bible they were going to follow to. But the show became so popular that they got to into season 5, and the showrunners were like, "I've told the story I planned out. I'm out." But then they hired somebody else, and they kept the show going for 10 more seasons.
Oh my gosh.
And I quit after about season 7 or maybe 8. I'd have to go back and look at it. But I know a little bit about how it resolves in season 15, and part of me is like, oh, I got to go watch that, because kind of like the Incarnations of Immortality series, they end up replacing God because they don't like the guy who currently has the position, which is a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, that's an odd
Um,
concept from our religious perspective.
right, like it doesn't fit, but it makes sense. Again, I think other religions have to wrestle with issues that we in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, I don't think we realize how philosophically strong and theologically tenable the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is. I had a professor at BYU who once said, I wish I could force every Latter day Saint to take a philosophy of religion class, because sometimes we don't even know the questions to which we have the answers. And I thought that was quite profound and true. You never have to worry about like what happens with the people who never heard about Jesus Christ and then died, like, in Timbuktu 3,000 years ago. How can they be saved? Well, we have baptisms for the dead, and everybody just kind of grows up knowing about that. It's not a problem. But if you're like an evangelical Christian or a Roman Catholic, that is a problem for them. How can that person be saved without knowledge of Jesus? And so, I don't know.
Mhm.
We have these things in our church that I find very faith and testimony building. And it's been interesting to just look at other people's stories and see them trying to wrestle with some of these issues through the lens of storytelling and sort of the themes that they bring up through these different characters and approaches. So
Well, and as we're reading the Doctrine and Covenants and doing church history this year, it's kind of just made me think of like those are the kind of philosophical questions that Joseph Smith had before the first vision and throughout the Doctrine and Covenants, that every question, every little bit of the restored church, from the first vision up till I assume nowadays, even President Nelson is asking some of those same philosophical questions that we don't have the answer, or at least not a clear answer to, because our you know social issues of our day are very different than social issues of 1820.
yeah,
But all the same, it still started out with philosophical religious questions that the writers of Supernatural and Lucifer are were trying to piece together from what they thought was best.
yeah.
But
That's exactly right. I think if you believe in God, or even have the concept of God as a force in the universe or as a character in a story you're telling, you have to wrestle with some of these issues. And I find other people's attempts to figure some of this stuff out uh, very fun and sometimes deeply insightful. And at the very least offer a compare and contrast to my own beliefs, which helps me understand them better. I think you're totally right. Joseph started asking questions, and we haven't really stopped since then. And I take very seriously the thought that the restoration is ongoing, um,
mhm.
and uh, and that could be fun. We'll see where it goes and what stories other people might tell around these same sorts of themes in the future. Who knows? So yeah.
I mean, we got General Conference in just a few weeks, so who knows what's going to come next?
That's right. Everybody take your vitamins, right? That's what President Nelson
Right.
said.
So you mentioned a little bit how the podcast came to be. It was, Liz's brainchild. It kind of started with her, and then you joined. But like, what was the basis for the podcast? How did you and Liz hook up for that project?
So we're actually part of a sort of private group. Um, you can
Exclusive
find the
club.
manifesto online. It's the Radical Orthodoxy group. The people who sort of have to sign on to the statements in the manifesto. And I think it's sort of evolved from that original sort of group into now, do you affirm the three proclamations of the church, the living Christ, the family proclamation, and the restoration one from just a couple of years ago? And it's just a private little group. We have a Discord server and we hang out and talk. And she wanted there to be a podcast that discussed TV and movies and other things. Although I think we've only done TVs and movies up to this point. Maybe we should do a play sometime. I don't know.
You've
That
talked
have
about
been,
books, so at least in
well, yeah.
discussion.
We always recommend various things, and sometimes it's books, but we've never done it as a book club, so to speak.
Yeah.
But she just wanted there to be someone, or she wanted there to be a podcast that discussed these various things that are in our culture that lots of people are watching from an explicitly Latter Day Saint perspective. Um, and it was a thought that I glommed onto immediately and began rather enjoying. And if I may toot our own horn a little bit, we got the Best Podcast Award from the Association for Mormon Letters last year, and I was rather touched at the gentleman who sort of presented us with the award when he said that it's like he explained our podcast better than I myself understood it when he said, which is weird, right? But when he said something like, what if all art is for Mormons? And I use that term to mean more broadly like Mormon culture, not just members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day
Yeah.
Saints. What if all art is for Latter-day Saints? And I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of our podcast that way, but it's true. We try to watch everything and say, does this speak to us Latter-day Saints? How does it do so? How can we understand things better through our own faith? How can we disagree politely with its worldview or some of the lessons it's trying to teach? I mean, you said you enjoyed our discussion on Inside Out 2. Chris Cunningham and I kind of got in a little bit of a row during that episode because he and I read the movie very differently. And I rather liked it, and he did not like some of the themes. But we were watching it and picking up on different parts and different cues, and so it's a good exercise to, and I've always enjoyed this in my own life. We used to have sci-fi night back when I was the Elders Quorum president in back in Maryland. Once a week, anybody wanted to come over to my house or to my friend Jared's house, and we'd watch a sci-fi movie and we talk about it, and we watched all sorts of stuff. And that was a community-making sort of thing that we had, but it was also fun for all of us to watch these stories and then talk about what they had meant in our lives.
Mm.
Why we enjoyed them, the themes they brought out, the parts we disagreed with, and so it's been a delightful podcast project to be a part of.
Well, and I can't say that I've listened to all of episodes of your podcast because I haven't watched all of the movies that you've discussed. But I mean, like, I know I mentioned Inside Out 2. I listened to that episode, the Arrival podcast episode that Michael was in, and then I mean, the Bluey episode was just. I had to once my kids got into Bluey because I put off getting into Bluey because I knew that I would get sucked in. But I definitely jumped back to your Bluey episode after I got in, and it's just and from something like explicitly completely wholesome like Bluey to something a bit more. I don't know if I can say controversial, but like you said, you guys got in kind of a button heads or like on different sides of the issue with Inside Out 2. To there's other ones that like you'll always rate it from telestial, celestial, and so it's all the way across the spectrum of different kind of media that you'll look at, and it's something that I really appreciate that can find good and truth in all of it.
Yeah, yeah. We've even covered a couple of controversial. Like, I don't think we're going to do like the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City or whatever the new Hulu Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, right? Like, we're not going to cover that one.
I don't blame you.
Gonna, yeah, I think I'd have to gouge my eyes out or go commit ritual suicide or something. I don't know. It just seems so vapid to me. But we did cover Under the Banner of Heaven, um,
And that
and
was
talked about
very
how different Latter Day
controversial.
Saints had reacted to this portrayal of this terrible event that really did happen in Utah history and in church history. How accurate it was to actual lived experience of members of the church and things like that. Like, we've done that a couple of times, but I certainly wouldn't say like the purpose of the podcast is to talk about every representation of Latter Day Saints in film and media. But we've hit on a couple of those, and that's been uh, so yeah, we try to cover the gamut, everything from Bluey to Under the Banner of Heaven. So, there's something. You do point out a flaw in our podcast, sort of. How do I say this? A flaw in the method of our podcast that if you haven't watched the movie or the TV show that we're talking about, it may not be of interest to you. So if you haven't watched season 3 of Star Trek Discovery or whatever, maybe that episode won't be as interesting to you. But I still hope we model the ability to watch something and then talk about it intelligently with other people with whom you may disagree on various points, even if you haven't watched the particular movie or TV show or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I know I feel that sometimes when picking topics for our podcast that it's like, um, my dad is great. He'll listen to like every episode that I do, I swear. But like when before we started the podcast, he hadn't seen Doctor Who. He hadn't seen, um, oh, I can't remember what other ones like, but I think he's listened to every episode that I've done. And oh, I guess we did a Super Smash Brothers episode, and like my dad's like never played video games, so it's like people are gonna like. I've very well accepted like we're not gonna have consistent listeners per se. Like some people are gonna jump around, and it's
Yeah,
just par for the course with the format that we've chosen to do, and it's kind of the same for you guys that not every episode is going to be for every person.
yeah. I started listening to your episode from a year ago on the future of Star Wars, and I got about 3 minutes in, and I was like, I'm sorry for this. I'm like, I don't want to listen to this because the ground has shifted so much in the last
Mm-hmm.
year that like you're talking about projects that have been canceled or furloughed permanently, and I don't know. It was an interesting archaeological dig into Disney's history with Star Wars. Um,
Oh yeah, and
uh,
a year ago it was very relevant. I felt
right?
like so now it's
Yeah.
like I'm still working on translating that one into onto our YouTube channel, and when I do that one, I'm gonna be like, there's not much to see here because that's all outdated.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
It's part of our attention economy these days. Is like if we had wanted to do an episode on what was it, the new Western American Primeval, right? If we wanted to do an episode on American Primeval, you have to like watch the entire 6-episode miniseries in a day or two, and then record, edit, and get it out so that people will respond to it and see it in a sort of a timely fashion.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't know, man. We got lives, so
Yeah,
it's hard.
not every podcast episode is going to be like that, and I get that even with our blog posts that, you know, I asked one of our guys, like, you know, writing about Agatha all along, but then his life got busy, and it's like, you know what, time's kind of passed, you know, because that's life.
Yeah.
That's life. Let's wrap up a little, unless you got more to say about the podcast process. We'll wrap up with a few of our, like, kind of get to know you questions towards the end on here.
No, it's all good.
Favorite scripture?
So my favorite scripture is very idiosyncratic to me, and I find it was a tender mercy that I was actually asked to give a talk in my new ward last year when we covered the scripture for "Come Follow Me," and so we weren't assigned topics, and I gave a talk on Moroni chapter 7 verse 48, which I'll read really quick. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, pray unto the Father with all the energy of heart, that ye may be filled with this love, which he hath bestowed upon all who are true followers of his Son Jesus Christ. Now here's the part that I really resonate with. That ye may become the sons of God, that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, that we may have this hope, that we may be purified even as he is pure. Amen. I have a PhD in theology. Like, I love talking about doctrine and how these different sort of theories fit together and how this scripture matches up with that scripture and all this. Like, I just love, that is my bread and butter. That is my wheelhouse. I love it. This scripture reminds me that in the end, it is not what you know that is important. It is what you are, what you have become. And I love the implication that you will recognize Christ only in as much as you are a mirror for him. That you may become the sons of God, that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. It's not about doctrine. There's not a quiz. You don't get to heaven and St. Peter hands you a Scantron and says, like, you have to get 75% or higher. You don't get to go past the pearly gates. But he will say, hey, it's that lady who baked cookies for the missionaries every week and was a seminary teacher, early morning seminary teacher for 20 years. Whatever. Come on in. We've been waiting for you. Like, that's what it's about. And this scripture reminds me of that.
Well, and I like the emphasis you put on it too, because when you started reading that, my brain fixated on the first part of that verse, which is important. The praying for charity. My dad taught me that, you know, his big thing is, like, you know, pray every day to know who you can serve, which is not a small thing. And I mean, I do physical therapy for a living, so I'm in a helping profession. It's a service oriented whatever, so, like, I have ample opportunities to serve people during the day. Do I view it that way? Maybe not every day, but like, I got fixated on the pray for charity, you know, who can you serve concept that I've been taught. But I love your emphasis on the second half of the verse, because they go together, but it's, you know, like you said, that's the end game. That's the, you know, I got Doctor Strange in my mind now. We're in the end game. You know,
yeah, that's right.
That's what it's really about. Is like who you're becoming, not just the prayers, not what you do, not the calling. It's who you're becoming in the eternal sense. So I like that.
Yeah, I highly recommend President Oaks's talk, "The Challenge to Become." It's a great one that's sort of along these same things. It's not about like The Good Place, right? If you end genocide, you get like 1,000,000,000 points, and if you start slavery, you get like negative 1,000,000 points. It's sort of your righteousness is a tally of how much good you did versus how much evil you did.
There was something about that series that, like, resonated. I'd had issues with some of the finale because
yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of the same, like we are talking about. It's like,
Well,
trying to understand the afterlife from
Right.
a non-restoration perspective.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll have you on. Liz and I want to do an episode on that show at some point. And
Please.
yeah, but I kind of disagree with their assessment. Like, if you are like, there's like one person who goes to the middle place, and everybody else the scales put them in the bad place, and everybody else the scales put them in the good place, and it's just a tally mark. And I think it's more about who you
Let's table
are.
that, because
Sure.
if you are going to invite me on for the Good Place episode, I have things that,
Okay.
from
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
plot
Yeah.
holes to how the series ended to the point system, I could put
Yeah.
some thoughts together for you guys.
Sure. 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 More on that on pop culture on the Apricot Tree sometime in season 3.
There you go. Top 3 fandoms. What do you got?
Okay, so Star Trek, first of all, it's been a part of my life since we would watch it on Sunday nights as a family. Next Generation, growing up in the 80s, it was just sort of a part of our family life. I really enjoyed it. And I think,
I was raised by a Trekkie. Like, my dad had VHS tapes of labeled
sure,
all of the episodes that he could contain in our entertainment system. So I hear you right
nice.
there.
Yeah, my dad was the Trekkie too, and I remember going to basketball practice, doing junior jazz back in the day, and making sure we ended on time so we could get home and watch the premiere of Deep Space Nine. Like that, um,
Nice.
and I have to say, I am a Star Trek completist. I have watched every episode of every show that has ever been produced, even the animated series. So it's been
Oh wow.
it's a sort of a long project of mine over the past like 15 or 20 years or so. Anyway, just watch an episode a week, kids, and you can do that too if that's
Mm.
if that's up your wheelhouse.
I'm currently
um,
working on the Next Generation. I've watched the original series. That took a while. And then I
yeah,
watched Strange New Worlds from the start. So that's as much Star Trek, but again, I was also raised by a Trekkie, so I have
sure.
a love for it, even if I haven't seen as much as you.
Yeah, it. If you ever have an episode just on Star Trek, I'd love to sit and talk. That's been uh, it's interesting to sort of go through the whole thing and see the different approaches to it. And anyway, yeah.
As I
My other
get further
fandom,
along, I might take you up on that.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, One of the other fandoms I enjoy, of course, is just Star Wars. I know it's cliche to say Star Trek and Star Wars, but I think Star Trek is very aspirational. Like, this is what we humans would like to be in the future. And Star Wars is very fantasy in space, right? Knights and wizards, and there's magic and things like that. And it just seems to hit all of sort of the basics beats of storytelling in fantasy and myth and history all over the world, but with spaceships and laser swords. And so it's just good fun storytelling. Although I
And who doesn't
will,
love a good lightsaber?
right? It's the best weapon in the universe. Search your feelings, you know it to be true. Um, Although I will give a plug for, if you can find it, and I have a copy of the PDF, so if anybody wants to reach out to get it from me, I'm sure you can find it online too. If you read the original script for episode 9, it is so much better than whatever they finally ended up doing with Rise of Skywalker. So that is my headcanon as they continue the timeline. I'm just going to be like, nope, it wasn't this J.J. Abrams abomination. It was the Rian Johnson, I think, yeah, Rian Johnson's original script that had some good philosophical commentary and made a lot more sense. And just, I don't know what they were smoking when they decided to stop with that one and go with rehire J.J. Abrams. So Star
I'm,
Wars is another fandom of mine.
I might
But
have to check that
episode,
out, because I enjoyed episode 9 well enough, at
oh,
least.
okay, now I don't know if we can be friends.
Uh, wait. I haven't read the script, so let me read the script and maybe
Fair
let
enough.
me. No,
I
I
have
thought
your
there was some.
email. I'll send it
I thought there
along.
was some good commentary on identity in the episode 9 that did come out, with
Sure.
Rey choosing to not be a Palpatine, which has been made fun of over the internet in the years since. But I thought it was. I thought it was good. That part. I don't know about the rest of
Yeah.
it, but it's also been a while since I watched it.
I can agree with that being a good theme to discuss. and to see sort of, it doesn't matter what circumstances you were born under, you can choose to be something different. Totally behind that 100%.
The movie itself is a different discussion, and I'm
Sure.
okay if it's not my favorite movie. It's not even my favorite Star Wars movie, but I did enjoy it.
Sure. Agree to disagree. And my last fandom I'll bring up, we have Star Trek, we have Star Wars. Stargate is, I think, an underrated sci-fi franchise. Sort of takes place in modern times and sort of is the idea of what would happen if we ran into all this advanced technology and how would we react to that. And it's sort of towards the end of the franchise, which sadly was cut off, sort of the place between where we are now in society and the Star Trek version of us that we hope to become. As we gain more technology and are given thus more responsibility for using it appropriately, I enjoyed Stargate quite a bit. So those are sort of my top three fandoms. Absolutely love Stargate Universe, even though it only got 2 seasons and was canceled way too early. Fantastic show.
All right. Favorite superhero?
Oh, Batman. It's just a guy who is so dedicated and smart and intelligent that I don't know. I've always found him a really interesting and good character because he doesn't have superpowers. It makes him more fun because he has to rely on his wits and his skill and his bodily, like his martial arts training and sort of his intelligence and things. And I find him really interesting and fun.
You'd have gotten along with Dr. Ben Jepson, who I had on the podcast a couple weeks ago. That I read his book about like all these like missionary parables
The
with superheroes.
superhero missionary book, yeah.
And I mean, the first chapter is all about Batman being an example of consecration.
Yeah.
So it's consecrating his life to all the other stuff, and he described his. I could recommend his book again. Just that there's a superhero for everyone in that book.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed your conversation with him.
I did too. All right, let's finish off with if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Okay, so I knew this question was coming, and I have to ask you a clarification question. Do only I get the superpower, or do other people get superpowers too? Like, is Elon Musk going to turn into Iron Man if I decide I want Thor's power or something, right? Like, because that changes my answer a little bit.
The number of times I've asked this question, I've never thought of that, but that's a good point. I mean, I kind of
because if we're going to create supervillains, I'm going to just bow out, be like, nope, we have enough problems on our own.
I mean, I imagine Incredibles, Marvel, DC heroes, they all got heroes and villains with superpowers. So yeah, kind of a package deal, right?
Okay, so that changes my answer. Because I kind of like the idea of being able to do superhero stuff but do it anonymously. So I was kind of leaning towards Shazam. So I could change into the superhero but change back to my normal self. But I mean, Clark Kent can wear glasses, and I guess everybody sort of falls for that. I don't know if that would work in the real life.
Zachary Levi, even better, right?
Well, sure, right. Although there is a fun video on YouTube if you see Henry, and it's of Henry Cavill walking around Times Square in a suit and glasses underneath the pictures of him for Man of Steel, and nobody recognizes him. So I don't know. I'm also reminded that Charlie Chaplin once took like 2nd or 3rd place in a Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest. So I don't know. Maybe Clark Kent can put glasses on and nobody will recognize him as Superman. So my other thought is that I would just. Yeah, my other thought is that I would then be Professor X, because then you can influence things just from your living room.
If you make Cerebro your living room,
well, sure. I mean, so you get the point. You don't have to like go somewhere to do something. You can just influence people sort of subtly, from the comfort of the Cerebro under your home. I don't know however you would do that. And so those are sort of the two that appeal to me because of the anonymity that could be granted, but the influence you could also wield.
Yeah. For good, not for evil.
For good. Oh, absolutely. Strong
Go
bad,
listen
right?
to my
Do you use your powers
podcast.
for good or for awesome?
So
Good,
go
in my
listen to my
case.
podcast. Go listen to my podcast.
Right?
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today on this for this episode. If you guys haven't checked out Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, check them out with new content hopefully coming soon once Liz is free from school. If there is such a thing as free from school when you get your master's degree.
There will be for her. We're going to do one episode on Shogun, but that's all we have planned for the immediate future.
And maybe The Good Place, apparently.
Well, yeah, maybe in our next season. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we don't represent the church in any official capacity. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and to review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Select episodes are available on our YouTube channel. Show notes and additional content are available on our blog, latterdaysaintgeeks.com. Intro and outro music were provided by David Schradell.